good morning, or afternoon, or evening. I'm now in my office in Beijing, China, and I hope all my friends are very healthy and well. I'm very happy to be here to share my research on flood risk loss assessment based on entropy weight and topsis, an empirical study of southern China. Of course, it's not the topic of epidemic situation, but it's also a very serious situation, a very serious disaster. I'm from China Academy of Sciences, and my institute name is Institute of Science and Development. Of course, my name is also Chen. And I will talk about the following four parts. The first is introduction of my research, and then the study area and dataset. The third, I will introduce my methodology, the topsis, and how to define the weight. And lastly, I will give the result and discussion. Okay, my report issued by Center of Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters indicates the flood is most frequently natural disaster in the world, with an average of 149 from 2009 to 2018, and the number has risen to 194 in 2019 worldwide. Globally, flood is the deadliest disaster, accounting for 43% of deaths, despite massive flood protection efforts undertaken by the United Nations and individual countries. As for my country, China is the most affected country by natural disaster in the world, and the related economic losses have increased over the past decades, which accounted for 1.42% of the annual GDP since 1990s, and nearly 40 times higher than that of the United States. Historical statistics indicates that the burden of flood was not shared equally in China, for the southern region has suffered the most frequent hazard and the worst loss. Precipitation distribution in China corresponds to the climate's spatial difference, where the south and southeast is subtropically humid zone, while the north belongs to temperature monsoon and continental climate that relatively dry. As a result, May to September is a wet season, and October to April is a dry season. Precipitation in the wet season accounts for at least 3/4 of the annual in total, and flood hazard prone to occur as a consequence of heavy rain during May to June. This region is the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River, and the largest river basin in China, and has experienced destructive flood triggered by heavy rain. Recent years, several extraordinary catastrophic floods have occurred in China, and almost all of them are located in southern China. Limited researches are available concerning flood risk of southern China, despite provinces that are more vulnerable to flood disaster than other regions. Therefore, we'd like to evaluate the flood risk in southern China and identify the difference between flood risk and the resulting loss. To attach this purpose, we make a comparative analysis of the potential risk and the resulting loss for the period of 2009 to 2018. This is the study area. As you can see, the drainage density here is high. Many major basins in China are located here, like the Yangtze River, Pearl River, and the Huaihe River. This is the Yangtze River and the Pearl River and the Huaihe River. Climate and geographic conditions make southern China becomes a high-risk area in flood occurrence, particularly for crest basin and cross-regional floods. Besides, southern China is highly urbanized, densely populated, and economically developed. 9 provinces here belong to the Yangtze River economic belt, which is the most developed socio-economic area in China. As a result, the vulnerability and exposure to disasters are extremely high. This area. And we will use the entropy weight and Topsis method to do the evaluation or the assessment of the risk. And the evaluation index of flood risk has 3 dimensions, including hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Exposure accounts to the largest number of 0.4304, indicating this exposure is a significant dimension in the index system. As for assessment indicators, the more the variable weight, the more important it is for flood risk. The table 4. Flood loss assessment indicates that the most 3 variables are affected: population, death, and missing and direct economic loss, making the population ranks the highest in index dimension with a value of 0.477. And this figure illustrates flood risk dimensions of southern China, and this is the mean annual value from 2009 to 2018 calculated by Topsis. Sichuan, Yunnan, Jiangsu, and Anhui tie on the top spot in hazard, while Jiangxi and Fujian province are the lowest. As for exposure, Jiangsu and Guangdong are the highest, while Hainan is the lowest. This is the Hainan province. When it comes to vulnerability, Sichuan, Jiangxi, and Hunan province tied to the first place, and Zhejiang comes in last. I think this is Zhejiang. This is Zhejiang. Okay. Assessment results from the population, agriculture, and economic indicates that Sichuan ranks at the top both in population and vulnerability, while Hubei and Hunan tie to the top spot in agriculture. Hainan ranks the lowest in all of the 3 dimensions, followed by Jiangsu that comes to the last in population and economic dimensions. Besides, there is little difference between Chongqing, Guizhou, and Guangxi for the 3 dimensions. The measurement of flood disaster risk and resulting loss levels are listed here. Threshold of these 2 levels are determined by hierarchical cluster algorithm, which is based on the relative closeness value calculated by TOPSIS. First of all, let us look at the temporal spatial distribution of flood risk. In terms of temporal variation, flood risk in southern China is relatively low in the selected years from 2008 to 2014, and becomes severe since 2016 as high risk and extremely high risk provinces are relatively more from then on. Flood risk in Jiangsu is extremely high during all of the selected years from 2008 to 2018, whereas Hainan is extremely low during the same period. I think Jiangsu, maybe this is Jiangsu province. In terms of spatial distribution, extremely high-risk provinces are in the majority, including Anhui, Sichuan, and Jiangsu. Hainan and Fujian have an extremely low flood risk. Most of the provinces rank at the medium level, like Hubei, Zhejiang, Guizhou, Jiangxi, and Yunnan. As for the resulting losses, we can see that resulting losses of flood disasters in southern China are optimistic during most of the selected years in the study period. All provinces are at extremely low and low level, except for that in 2010 and 2012. The most significant temporal variation of flood loss has been in Sichuan during the selected year from 2008 to 2012, which increased from extremely low in 2008 to extremely high in 2010 and 2011, and then dropped to the extremely low level in 2014. Figure 5 illustrates the comparison of the sorting between flood risk and the resulting loss, indicating the flood risk ranks are not always in line with the resulting loss ranks. Jiangsu, Anhui, Guangdong, Guangxi, and Zhejiang, these 5 provinces belong to the same situation, that flood risk level is higher than the resulting loss. As for these high risk and low loss provinces, the gap between the risk and loss reaches its highest in Jiangsu, Guangdong, and Anhui, which can be inferred as the effect of prevention measures. Sichuan, Hunan, Hubei, Yunnan, Guizhou, Jiangxi, and Fujian, these 7 provinces belong to the other situation that are resulting loss level is higher than the risk, and the gap between the risk and loss is maximum in Jiangxi, Hunan, and Hubei, which may be blamed in the ineffective provincial measures. Hainan is the third situation in which the rank of annual flood risk is the same as the resulting loss. Okay, thank you very much. Hope you can keep health in the epidemic situation this special year.